The primary purpose of Uniquely Human, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. Listeners should consult with professionals familiar with each individual or family for specific guidance.
Uniquely Human, the podcast, is produced by Elevated Studio. Music is graciously provided by Matt Savage of Savage Records.
Hi, I'm Dr. Barry Prezant, clinical scholar, researcher, and consultant on autism and neurodiversity, and a Brooklyn boy raised in the big city.
And I'm Dave. I'm none of those things, and I grew up on a farm in Illinois. But being on the spectrum myself, I have plenty of personal insight to lend.
And this is Uniquely Human, the podcast, a show that illuminates and celebrates autism and neurodiversity. Today on Uniquely Human, the podcast, we have going to have a wonderful discussion that I've been looking forward to. We have Rebecca Rosenzweig and her mom, Karen Carson. Hi, Rebecca and Karen.
Hi, Barry.
Hi, Barry.
Just a little note, and Becca will remember this clearly. At our last parent retreat weekend, we had one of the topics was intergenerational influences of neurodivergence in the family. And it was just an absolutely marvelous discussion that Becca helped to facilitate. And I said, oh my goodness, we have to follow up on this as a topic. So just a little bit about you guys, and then we're going to dive right in, okay?
Okay.
All righty. I'm going to call you Becca because that's how I know you. But
Yep,
Rebecca Rosenzweig is an MSW candidate at USC, University of Southern California, and an autistic advocate. She is a therapist at the Child and Family Guidance Center and facilitates groups at the Neurodivergent Collective. She also presents on autism and neurodiversity affirming practices to schools and organizations. She loves neurodiversity, psychology, doggy noses, and bear tummies, particularly Paddington. She lives in Los Angeles with her dog Samson, who's the cutest little pooch, and her partner Ellie. Okay, a little bit about Karen. Dr. Karen Carson is a physician, got her doctorate in medicine from Vanderbilt University and a residency in pathology at UCLA. She's also a children's book author, and we got to see some of her books recently on a visit out to LA. And most importantly, the mom of Becca, Sky, and Bogey. She lives in LA in the neighborhood where she grew up, in a house filled with rescue dogs. Dogs are a passion, and so is writing. She writes about dogs. She is the author of the children's chapter book series, Sir Do Goody Button and Flea Beans. Is it Flea Beans or Flea Bins?
Flea Bins. Flea Bins, the great ... troublemaker.
Okay. Flea Bins, the great troublemaker, under the pen name K. Francis Carson. Okay, so given our topic for today, tell us a little bit about your immediate and extended family, members who are neurodivergent, and then we'll dig in a little bit more specifically. So, Karen, would you like to take the lead on this?
Okay. Well, beginning, as we all know, I am and Becca is, so right there in the family. And my sons grew up with the diagnosis of ADHD, so they would be neurodivergent as well. I think in retrospect, in my family, my mom, in the most wonderful way, was neurodivergent as well, and we bonded.
And
many,
grandpa, too.
Maybe. With my dad, it was a little harder to tell. He was a psychiatrist, psychoanalyst. So everything, we analyzed everyone, even the dog at breakfast. We're all dog people. So the dog did not escape that. So I think our whole family was very focused on analyzing people. Becca has so inherited that as well, but I think neurodivergence is definitely in my family long before Becca.
Yeah, so Becca, as the daughter, how about a little bit from your perspective?
Yeah, so I I'm autistic and ADHD, and it really wasn't until after I learned that about myself that my mom uh, started identifying with those traits too, and got her own diagnosis. And I think we see sprinklings of sensory stuff and, social preference differences and all sorts of things all over our family.
Yeah.
And so, regardless of who has a label and who doesn't have a label, I think the traits kind of are
Very much
scattered about.
there. Yeah, very much extended
Right.
family as well.
That's an interesting thing about labels too, is it's like
Yeah.
what's, no pun intended, what's most apparent? Like, is it
That's a
the
good
traits are there? The labels could change in 50 years. They tend to
right,
do that.
right.
Yeah, I know they're working on a new DSM as we speak, but
Yeah.
the but the traits are regardless of the labels, they're
And that
all
was a good
around.
pun, by the way. No.
Thank you. I like that.
Not
I
there,
should
right?
point those out.
Yeah. I'm
You know,
yeah, so yeah. So
I love that. No, hopefully, so the first DSM change from 4 to 5 cured me of Asperger's. Maybe this one will cure me of something else. We'll see.
Yeah.
I did just read an article that was talking about the new DSM, and I'm only pointing this out because it's a big part of this podcast in general, and that is they are really urging for a lot of the quote-unquote labeled conditions in the new DSM to have input from lived experience, from people who are actually living with those labeled conditions. And in the past, it was always thought to be much more of a kind of research ivory tower endeavor. But now they're actively seeking out a lot more information, both in terms of diagnosis as well as support and treatment approaches, which is great, long overdue.
You know, Barry, I was just thinking about that yesterday because so many of the traits listed in the DSM and it's so pathologized, and these traits can look like pathology from the observer's perspective. But if you ask autistic people, a lot of those traits are actually joy and regulation and like physiological experiences of feelings, and that's not such a bad thing. I wouldn't say that that's a pathology.
That excellent point. If that's kind of who you are as a person, it's only looking against some kind of neurotypical standards that have been set to say, okay, well, these people are other due to these traits. But from the perspective of lived experience, especially if you're part of a community that's neurodivergent, it's who you are in that community.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you're both professionals, you both could kind of look from the outside in a sense. So are there any kind of what people might refer to as unspoken rules or adaptations that you feel have helped the family, since we're talking about members of the family having shared experiences?
Beck, do you want to start? Just your
Sure.
perspective, and I can add from.
Well, I mean, I was thinking about how in our family, everyone has sensory preferences. And so, different temperatures, different textures, different, sounds and light settings and all those things. And so there's not really much of a judgment around like it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too loud, it's too quiet, it's too bright, we need to dim the lights. I think the problems come up when our sensory preferences don't align with each other, because we all have our own preferences. It's one thing I was thinking about.
Yeah. And so are we talking sensory or some just other issues that would come up with being autistic? And
I personally, sorry, Barry, I was just going to say it, sensory for sure. Anything, especially related to, we'll say, the the daily rhythm or the flow or the communication within the family. When I think of these sort of unwritten family, we'll say adaptations, but it's sort of like, hey, this is what works for our family. And this is, we know that Becca needs some downtime after being away on the road for a few days or whatever.
I think some of it would just have been intuitive things passed along, like things that as a child I had that maybe my mom knew, my parents, that I needed because they needed it, and then I would be sensitive. Becca and were talking about a question like this, and we kind of came up with another example that was not sensory, but maybe involved social issues, and how important it was. And I always practiced this, where birthday parties, every kid was invited, no kid was left out. And not everyone did that. And I knew how difficult that would be, especially if a child was left out because they were different, because they were not neurodivergent. So, and luckily my kids' school was very, very sensitive to things like that. They were they were a developmental school that was very, very sensitive, and they kind of practiced that and preached it. And we felt it, not everyone did, but it was things like that that I think, we just did, or seeing Becca or one of the boys do something that maybe seemed quirky, and it was all okay. It was all okay. Beck, you were talking about some things I didn't know, like when you were little, but that you
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that, a lot of the things that maybe would be flagged as concerning in other families weren't flagged as concerning in our family because it was just the way we regulate.
Yeah.
For example, when I was little, I loved to get into small spaces, and I liked being around all the people, but I liked my little cozy corner. So I'd go like under the counter in the kitchen while everyone was hanging out, or I'd go in like the laundry basket when people were doing whatever. And that was just like, oh, Becca's just doing her thing. Like, it wasn't seen as something that was weird or different or bad. It was just a kid being a kid. And we were talking about that last night, and my mom mentioned, like, in nursery school, what did you do?
Yes, we had, and we had the classrooms had these cubbies in there that were like your lockers, but they were open. They didn't have doors on them, and they were big enough for a kid to crawl into. They were still there. Becca did not go to my old nursery school, but the boys did, and the room was the same. And I remember remembering that I would crawl into that cubby and just hang out there. And I was too big for it then, when the kids were little. But I thought about, like, I could still do that. No, it was too big. Days were over. But but yeah. So it's similar things, and yeah, that was kind of an interesting correlation.
Yeah.
My parents had a wicker hamper that they set up in my brother's and my bathroom in the farmhouse when we were growing up, and I distinctly remember it was in my early teens when it occurred to me I was too big to fit in it anymore, and I was like, I need a new bunker. I spent a lot of time in that.
Yeah, I can understand that, Dave. We have our own, I still have my cozy spots that I like to get into.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Keep them.
Yes. And
Samson, Becca's dog, has all the same things. He's got this little pineapple that he goes into.
That's the thing is I just, he has his own cozy stuff now too that if I like it, then he must like it.
Yeah.
and I remember in a pretty recent visit to LA when we spent some time, Karen, at your house, a very close friend of yours, Becca, also, we were having incredible, intense conversations that were fun, but a person who was visiting, who's neurodivergent, kind of said, okay, I need a break. And everybody totally got it. It was kind of like, sometimes the social piece. I often give examples to try to have neurotypical people relate to this. Going to a party where you make 3 times more visits to the bathroom if you're not enjoying the conversations, and
Right. Yes.
then you really need to get away. But here it's kind of very, very much expected in some cases. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's very, very important. So. It's interesting because I always think about the first time I met Becca over dinner at the Casablanca restaurant in Venice, I think, in Venice Beach. And so when you got a diagnosis or you kind of embraced the fact that you're neurodivergent, did it, I just got an email today from a 50-year-old gentleman who had read Uniquely Human and said, oh my God, it gave me a totally different lens to look at myself and to understand myself and to look back. But for you guys, what was it, kind of an epiphany of any moment, or it was like, well, this is who I am, yeah.
Well, I think for me, at least, it had really helped that most of my knowledge about autism before getting a diagnosis was from either specifically autistic people themselves, or from Uniquely Human. By the time I got diagnosed, Uniquely Human was the only book I had read about autism, and I had memorized it.
Yeah. Yes.
And all my other information was from autistic kids and adults, and so I really it felt very natural because I was relating to all these people more than I was relating to my neurotypical coworkers.
So it was more of a graceful kind of understanding in a sense, rather than boom,
Yeah,
as you hear
I
from
mean,
some folks. Yeah.
I still didn't love getting the label at first. There was I would say, a grieving period. I did a lot of
Really?
crying about it.
Really? I didn't even know she was upset about it because it made so much sense. And to me, that she wasn't, I took it as kind of a relief to have something that we could, something like where there was so much to learn about, so much, in changes and things that were, to think about. It all made sense, and it was wonderful to be able to have that kind of explanation too, and framework to understand things out of. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
this is
but
we were reading about it.
once I was done crying about it, then it was a relief of, oh, now I guess I can get back into my cozy spots, and that's just part of who I am, and that's not a big deal. Um,
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that it's interesting what you're saying because that parallels to it's so interesting family dynamic, mother daughter, whoever, paralleling so close with um, so many of the married couples that I've worked with over the years since publishing my book has been, hey, this was a godsend. Thank goodness we learned this about my partner, about my husband. Meanwhile, the partner's thinking like, I didn't want this, um, and there is a grieving, and if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think in some cases when folks are kind of getting hit with this news or learning this about themselves, I think what they're grieving is like, okay, so I was never. We all want to fit in. We all have this instinct to not be the other. We want to be in the insert, and I think for some of us, what it is, it's a mourning of or grieving of, okay, that's not the hand I've been dealt. God, like it's quantifiably not the. So that's totally understandable because you it's sort of like you thought you had your GPS coordinates set, and then somebody grabs your GPS and changes the destination on you, and it's like, oh,
yeah.
thought I was going to Trader Joe's. I guess I guess we're going to Dave and Buster's, or on a much more serious note, though. So,
I've heard the phrase internalized ableism used, where some autistic people who I know said they realized that their reaction to getting a diagnosis was based in part of what they internalized from ableist culture, that this is not a good thing. This is just really a bad thing. There's nothing good about it at all. Therefore, you're and I'm speaking from a neurotypical standpoint, so I feel guilty saying this because I'm an outsider. But you're kind of feeling, I would imagine, that I am less than because that's what the culture always said about that label, and now that it's being applied to me.
Absolutely. I would say there's like these internalized assumptions about, independence versus interdependence and you know, other preferences and ways of regulating and ways of expressing feelings that are, you learn over time from other kids and people that there's one right way and the rest of the ways are wrong ways. But then I think once I got the label, then I was able to kind of go back to what the right way is for me, which doesn't isn't the right way for other people. Like there's the neurotypical ways of regulating, and neurodivergent sometimes looks different, and that doesn't mean that it's wrong or bad, or it's just different.
Right. And I think part of the pain point, to use corporate jargon, but part of what we're experiencing, Becca, is,
Hmm.
you know, uh, we know that the outside world has their assumptions. So even if we address our own, as Barry mentioned, it internal ableism, internalized ableism, or even if we change our own perspective about what it means, we know that there are plenty of people out there that still harbor their own beliefs.
Hmm.
And I think from a parent's perspective, all a parent wants is for their child to not struggle. Um, and that manifests in so many different ways throughout the parenting experience. But one way is just like you feel this sense of relief of like, oh, okay, so we know that we can predict now what will be the sorts of things that challenge you in certain contexts. And that's helpful for a parent as the
That's how I
individual.
felt. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That was, I think, my feelings in hearing Becca was before, my own diagnosis. It helped me understand Becca and how I could help her more or be part of that whole process. So,
Yep, yep.
I did want to ask you each, and it's kind of a tough question because maybe what I'm asking about is something that just came to you intuitively. But I was just wondering, Becca, for you as a daughter, do you think about things the way that Karen raised you, that she just kind of knew intuitively, but other people didn't treat you that way? And also the reverse for Karen. You just kind of alluded to this, Karen, based upon your own experience, how you cared for not only Becca, but for the boys as well. How your experiences just kind of naturally gave you insight into raising your kids.
You know, do you do you want to go first?
you start,
Okay.
and I will.
Well,
Yeah.
something that this makes me think about is the idea that I had my home self and my school self, and I think I was able to have my home self be uh, more aligned with who I was and what I needed because I was in an environment where there was people intuitively just, that was just it was okay. Like it was okay for me to hop in the laundry basket or, you know, have my particular preferences about what dinner plates we used because some of them are screechy and some of them are not screechy. And and stim around and do, rewatch the same show over and over again 50 times, even though that wasn't, what other peers would say was, age uh,
Hmm.
uh, aligned with
I'll,
my
I'll
age group.
add to that after when you're
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Like at home we were watching a lot of like older movies that were black and white, and that is do you want to go into that a little bit?
Sure. Black and white was my favorite world to kind of live in. So I loved, and this is something that I did with my parents. my sister as a family, we watched old movies and old TV shows, all black and white. And I love that world. I kind of pictured the world before, color in movies and TVs came out, like came out mainstream. Before that, that was what the world was really like. It was black and white,
Yep.
and it was better that way. It was much more calming, relaxing. There was just something about this black and white world. So naturally, that was like the soothing thing when you're homesick with a cold. You watch old reruns of old TV shows like Leave It to Beaver then, and well, Bewitched wasn't black and white, so there was that. But
But
there was something comforting and about this older era. And so that's what I did to comfort the kids. It's like, we're going to watch a TV show. And it's worked, I think, for all three of them, not just Becca especially, but certainly Bogey was having a panic attack when he had COVID. And I said, I want you to put on this show called My Three Sons. And call me back in half an hour to sit here with him after he finished the first episode. And then 2 or 3 episodes later, I finally call him, and it was like, yeah, it's working. He was doing fine then. So I don't know, but I'm kind of guessing other families didn't really do that for comfort. Maybe
Wow.
I don't know,
Well,
but anyway,
I think there's something about the predictability that we like. It's good for, the predictability of how these shows kind of unfold. And also, even the ones that are in color, they're more muted colors than they are now. Like, it's a lot. I think it feels better on my brain, at least.
Oh yeah,
Your
yeah.
brain too.
Bewitched is a big one for Beck right now, and but yeah, no, we do a lot of that. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to add that to the list of regulating strategies. My three sons in black and white.
Yep. They did later make color, but no, I would stick with the earlier black and white. Yes, yeah.
I will say, could we distinguish a little bit black and white, but also silent era? Or black and white with sound, because I went through a Buster Keaton phase that would knock your socks off.
Right. Black and silent.
Yes, I
All
was
silent.
I was
Yeah.
like, people wore suits to go outside and work on their car. Like, what kind of era was this? And my wife pointed out, she's like, well, you can't over romanticize that too much, but yeah, it was definitely a different time. But I know what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was growing up, my parents, on the farm, my dad always just listened to the oldies. If he listened to any music at all, it was oldies, what we called oldies, which was music from the 50s. Now it's music from like 10 years ago. But, we listened to the music from the 50s. And when I would go over to my friend's house, they'd be playing Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith, and I'd be like, can we turn on Everly Brothers? And they would look at me like, what? It was like, that's what my family does. I don't know. Like,
That's what we did. And Becca learned too. Old Blue Eyes was Sinatra. My mom would be playing it in the car, Sinatra tapes. And then I started doing all that too. So
Becca just internalized all this. It's just this family system.
There you go. Yeah. This is bringing up a lot of loose little memories of how many parents over the years, especially a bunch of years ago where I was around a lot of little ones on a regular basis, how many parents said, their kids would go over to the TV and turn the sound off and just want to watch what's going on and be riveted to what's going on. But you turn on the sound, it's like, okay, too much multimodal input here, the noise, the visual and so forth. So, wow. So you alluded to this a few minutes ago in terms of kind of what you might call strengths or interests that are inherited. Any patterns, and I'm going both ways here, that maybe Becca got, and we just spoke about some of the old TV shows and so forth, but also the reverse. Karen, just seeing what Becca's interested in and things that she has particular strengths in that you now see in yourself.
Oh, first of all, I have learned so much from Becca and a lot, like from you, mostly through Becca. Like she's the one who will always be teaching me all the time everything like from Uniquely Human. That was my major introduction, the entire world of autism, thanks to Becca, because it was not something I had really any kind of understanding of, and probably for the better, because they were at the time when Becca was little, actually, it's going to be a good thing we didn't know they were pushing ABA, and a lot of our friends were doing that with their kids and really like intensely. And it didn't ring right to me, so I'm glad we missed that whole era. But I try to really dive into all their interests, and Becca's is just utterly fascinating, I think. And so I'm just we watch a lot of TV and podcasts, your podcast, of course, but things that relate to autism. And that's a huge area of interest for me. I kind of dive in, I think, to the boys' interests of what they're doing as well. So, or I try to without meddling, it's what they want to share and all that.
Sometimes, like one of my enthusiasms is autism and neurodiversity and the sensory processing systems. And so sometimes I think that blends into like our problem solving, like if something's going on, I'm like, oh, let's try activating the proprioceptive system and see what happens. And we'll
got the solution.
We'll kind of trial and error different things and figure it out.
Yes, and let me just mention to our listeners that one of my favorite videos is of Becca speaking to the superintendent of schools and the school committee at the Burbank schools about how important it is for all teachers to be trained in understanding sensory issues and in supporting their students. So it's just kudos, Becca. You're walking the walk. You're not just talking the talk here.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah. I would not have been diagnosed or wouldn't have. I think I was officially diagnosed by my wonderful therapist, Marina Yakub, but I would have, I don't think it would have occurred to me as much if Becca hadn't opened it all up and suggested it. And for me, I didn't have any grieving period. It was like, oh my God, yeah, this makes total sense. That explains me. Wow. And it was quite refreshing to be able to put that together and based on some things Becca said, so or pointed out or observed.
Yeah, pointed out and observed at your age, right? Like, yes. I was diagnosed at 30, right? At that time I said, awesome, cool, great. However, if you had, I kind of high-fived my wife, it was a nice moment, it was like, this makes a lot of sense. If I were late teens, I early teens, whatever, a younger age, I don't know that I would have reacted the same because I was in the fit-in mentality, right?
Interesting. Yeah. So it's hard to know because I'm, twice your age of the diagnosis.
I doubt that. In terms of diagnosis,
I'm 62. Probably I was like, where it like really sank in. Yes, I am. Before I had an official diagnosis, whatever it means, but I knew at that point, I definitely am late 50s. So a lot, and then made sense, like going back, like, my parents and everyone else in the family, and that kind of thing. But it all, things started to make sense in a very kind of reaffirming way of explaining things in a positive way for me. So
interesting. It's like you get a diagnosis later in life, it can clarify what the history has been. When you're younger in life, it can feel daunting because you're interpreting it as, what does this mean for my future? Two completely different perspectives.
Yes, that's a really good point. For me, it was like, oh, that explains why I did this in third grade and this in fourth grade. And all the way through, it was like all these things that I can look at differently and say, no, it wasn't, it would have made sense under that lens. It would have made sense. And, if I had known, it's hard to go back and say, oh, I wish I knew that how important the swings were, because we had moved when I was 8, and then my swings that I had in the backyard in our old house, we had all these wonderful new things in the new house, but the old house had the swings. And at that point, I myself thought, yeah, I'm too old for swings. Of course, I don't need a swing set now. We got other bigger girl things or whatever. But I really missed the swings. And now in retrospect, it impacted me. It really impacted me to not be able to just go out in the yard and just go on the swings and, on the swing, my swing. Yeah.
You lost your agency.
I did. I did.
It wasn't your choice to get rid of the swings. They were taken from you.
They were, but not in a bad, like I said, not in a bad way. It wasn't like I was feeling like it was like I shouldn't be this attached and I should be able to be used to this. But I now know just how important the swing was for me, and why. So
it was your place to go to get away and kind of chill. So
yeah, totally. Yeah.
So my mind is going back to the discussion we had at the parent retreat. So Becca, as you recall, I think there probably were about 15 people, almost all moms. I think there might have been a dad or two. But the point that I'm raising now is the journey that you guys have been on has been, it sounds like, skewed more towards learning from each other, more towards more insight, more positive things. At that discussion group, there were some parents, some moms specifically, who spoke about the undiagnosed grandfather who just did not know and resented the behavior of the grandson. And there was a lot more of a discussion of the stresses of, and a lot of it, as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, Becca, but a lot of it was around family members in the extended family who were not aware of their neurodivergence, and kind of mistreating or having expectations of other family members. So it sounds, I never want to sugarcoat anything, but it sounds like you've been fortunate in part by who you are as people and also the information that you've gotten. But were there any challenges, or are there any challenges that you feel like you have to kind of put right on the table and talk about and say, oh, well, this is happening. Let's sit down and talk about how to resolve this, or at least, cope with what's going on here.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, Barry, because while, it's great that my mom and I are kind of on this journey of exploring and discovering who we are and how neurodivergence has influenced us. And we talk about, oh yeah, in 3rd grade I did this, and in 4th grade this happened. Of course, it's not always easy, and people misinterpret things. I've had plenty of experiences where I've been completely overstimulated, and from the outside, if you're not like in the loop on how the sensory systems work in neurodivergent, presentations of these sorts of things, there are a lot of assumptions that you can make about people and who they are and what they're doing. And if someone's jumping around and, flailing or whatever, like people assume things about you, right? And misinterpret things about you. And if you have your specific ways of regulating that people don't understand, then people try and make sense of things through their own context, right?
Mm-hmm. Let me just interject quickly. I neglected, I apologize for this, I neglected to say that all families have stuff.
Yeah.
All families have challenges and have stuff. But what I found to be interesting, going back to that discussion group at the retreat, was that some of the challenges were kind of a little bit more kind of related to a lack of understanding of neurodivergence specifically.
Yeah.
And that's something you just pointed out. Yeah.
There have been plenty of episodes, like there was the episode at Dr. Sue's office where I had a lot of like stuff in my throat from bronchitis, and I caused a scene and everyone was in the loop on what was going on.
Well,
There was
Becca, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. You're just a carbon copy of my daughter.
Really?
Just no, that's exactly something. It would be too much, overstimulated, overwhelmed, panic. You know, understandable panic, not irrational or anything. And then other people saying, "Well, that reaction's a bit too big for this situation." It's like
Yeah.
it's not. It's real to her. Let her be who she is.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, my daughter's 20 now, and
Uh-huh.
she had to go see somebody for a weird thing and a doctor, and it was actually she went to the urgent care clinic, and the person checking her into the urgent care clinic didn't believe that she was 20 because
Yeah.
she's so young and youthful.
Uh-huh.
She assumed
That
she was in early teens.
that happens to me too, and I'm 29.
It
And
happens all the time with that guy. They think
but
it's
I
great.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I've been at the airport where I was flying home from college, and I had a security guy come up to me and ask me where my parents were.
Yeah.
And I was like, they're home. And they're like, do you have someone here? And I was like, no,
They're home.
I'm by
I don't know.
myself.
Yeah.
Well, I promise that changes when people say to me, "You're how old? You look a lot younger." I go, "Yay!"
Yeah. Yeah. There's the time like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like I'm trying to think. There have been plenty of times, like there was a time when um I went to Universal Studios with my family. And this was my dad's side of the family, so my mom wasn't there, and we did the tour where they have like you get into a some sort of a cart thing, and it's supposed to be where you go around and see all the different movie sets, but there are parts of the tour where they turn off all the lights and you're kind of in this like fully encapsulated like room of screens, and so they have all these visual effects and you feel like you're floating or falling or seeing all these things crashing. Um, and this was before my I was diagnosed with autism, and I couldn't handle all the visual stimuli, like I couldn't process it all, and I couldn't tolerate it. And the cart would move as these different vision things were coming, like you were experiencing all these different things at the same time. And I think I squeezed my aunt's hand so hard that like, it was too much. It was painful for her. Um,
Yeah.
and and I started crying and I had a meltdown. And then when we got off, my uh I had relatives who were visiting and they were like, is everything okay?
We
Like,
were missing the big piece here that Becca is on the spectrum. She's autistic, and that makes a whole difference. But still, people just like it was all a formula of how to treat it, or over dramatizing, or wanting attention. We were told, all kinds of things that did not ring true. They didn't make sense, and I couldn't believe any of. I wouldn't. I was not following their advice. It was like, in time we're going to figure it out. And do you want to talk about that? Well, without the specifics, but there was one event at our elementary school that Becca had been struggling with a sensory issue her whole life, but this was going to impact a 3-day field trip that
Yeah.
the school went on to Astro Camp. Was that in Idlewild, up in Idlewild, which is a mountain area, very pretty mountain area. It was a traditional fourth grade trip, and as that was looming, it was more and more stressful because Becca wouldn't really be able to go with a sensory issue. And people were trying to give this advice, and no, she's been controlling, and this and that were things that I heard. And no, that's not it. There's
well,
something.
wait, can I pause for a second?
Sure.
I think that to emphasize the advice that you were given, I think you were told that I was being controlling,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
this was anxiety, and in
Right.
order
Anxiety.
to not let the anxiety win, I needed to push through it. Um,
Ugh.
and
And punitive, in a punitive way. One
Yes.
person who had actually been our nursery school director, who seemed to, she was a counselor now, giving advice on things. And her thing was like that, to even embarrass Becca and make her just like, like try and force things. And it was like, no, I'm not doing it. Can't go along with this. And really, just like a week, it was a week or days before this trip at school, days before nicest, warmest administrator. She's head of logistics at their elementary school, who may be on the spectrum herself. I don't know. She clearly gets individuals, kids, out of the box, everything. And she just said, tell you what, Becca, let's have just a little signal. And if this is bothering you, if this is getting to you, just give me like little signal. It was something like just little quirky hand movement, and she'd be watching and she'd take Becca out away from it. And it worked so smoothly. And Becca literally got over it. It just took the right person who just understood, who just with compassion. And even though there was a big group of kids, it was not too much trouble for her to just be able to look for that signal and to be able to just make it okay for Becca. And
that's the difference between blaming and supporting.
Yes, exactly.
It's a huge difference there.
Huge.
And if I could also mention that when those very judgmental comments or all this advice on how to deal with the problem comes from family members or people who you're going to encounter on a regular basis, that's much more difficult than a one-off from a stranger, where you could just throw that in the trash can and say, but if you know it may come back again, or it's a perception that somebody you know well has fixed in their mind, then it's tough.
Yeah.
And I want to revisit the whole, the idea of anxiety, because these things do cause anxiety, but we can't treat it as an anxiety issue at the root, because it's not.
It's just something that's happening in this flow of life right now that just doesn't match the way my brain sees comfort and sees things as okay. So.
And while it may seem like having a kid push through is going to make them, stronger and whatever in the long run, in reality, I think the sensory accommodation was what allowed me to participate.
Accommodations, right? Not trying to desensitize or just push through and masking, no masking. It wasn't none of it. It was just accommodating and having somebody gentle and warm and understanding be there to support her through it. The support, I loved your analogy there. Yeah.
There's value in exposure. There's value in being coached through what you're being exposed to in a controlled manner. That's the opposite of sending a child on a 3-day away from home field trip to quote unquote muscle through. That's a recipe for disaster. That sort of thing makes my blood boil.
Yeah. And Dave, what you mentioned earlier about giving, allowing, and even in a sense, modeling agency, saying to Becca, well, let me know, give me a signal, right. if you're starting to feel uneasy, or as we say, going down that slippery slope of dysregulation and being challenged, please let me know and we'll make it okay. And just the fact that you feel you have some control. Maybe this is a very crude analogy, but I often give the analogy of if you're having a potentially painful dental procedure, the difference between a dentist just kind of chugging through it as opposed to the dentist who says, well, raise your left hand if you're feeling too much sensation and we'll take a break. It's a huge difference. You're saying, I trust your experience and your ability to let me know what you need at this point, as opposed to push through, as you've all mentioned.
And it wasn't that she took me away from the sensory issue. It was that she was with me through it. Which I think joining a kid when there are going to be sensory experiences that you can't take away, right? And even if they're dysregulating, you're going to have to figure out how to get through it in some capacity. And joining a child in their experience, I think, is powerful.
Yeah.
Okay. So meeting them in the experience, right? With the perception or the perspective, I should say, that is closely as matched as possible to the child, meaning like, oh, those are big bumps, and not just quiet down, that's fine.
Right.
That's right.
Experiencing it, yeah.
A couple of phrases come to mind, kind of the just right challenge, And then a person we quote a lot, Roz Blackburn, who says, "Support me with your presence when things are challenging to me. Kind of be there with me. Don't be talking to me a lot or putting your hands all over me. Just be there with me.
Yes.
Kind of like bear witness." So I think a little bit of this come out already, but as we kind of conclude, what advice would you give to other families, around issues of neurodivergence across generations in family relationships? I mean, you've learned so much together that's already come out in our discussion. But what advice would you give, not only to mothers and daughters, but family members who know, if they know, that there are other neurodivergent members in the family?
My advice is knowledge is power. Learn as much as you can. Learn together. Teach them to be themselves when they're in environments that are uncomfortable, where maybe they can't fully get out of them. Find ways to accommodate. Help them find those ways. Don't make them fight it on their own and in the dark. We didn't have a choice when I was growing up, and certainly my parents, it was not on the radar. It wasn't, I don't even remember it back then when I was in medical school, it was DSM-3. Furthest I got was that I was OCD, which didn't quite fit. Becca
Yeah.
pointed out, I think a lot of things you think are OCD are actually autism, which was
Mm.
a brilliant observation Becca made that opened it all up. But I think that things were different then. We didn't have all of that, but now we do. We have books like yours, Barry, podcasts like yours, and so much more at our disposal. Make use of all that, add to it.
In this current climate, like it's really, really great to unmask, but if you're a racial minority group, if you're, some people are more vulnerable to uh, violence and judgment in the community, and unmasked autism can look so unconventional sometimes that it can scare people, I think. When a kid is, or an adult, if an autistic person is really happy and they're jumping and spinning and making all sorts of big movements with their bodies, and someone doesn't really get autism, then they can misperceive that, and that could be dangerous for the individual.
Especially if it's law enforcement involved.
Yeah.
And
Good,
and
very good
by the
point.
way, the double standard here is glaring. Like, if you watch these football championship games, the coaches dance around to do cartwheels and
Mhm.
sing like opera singers when their team does something good. It's like, oh, does he have autism, or does he get a
Yeah,
pass because he's a coach?
Well, and the football players
exactly.
throw their bodies at each other. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
Regulation.
and I'm not talking about during the game. I'm talking about after celebrating a touchdown. They're banging their heads together.
Mhm.
It's like,
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, punching each other in the head when we're supposed to protect their brains. But
Yeah.
anyway, we digress. Go ahead, Becca.
All to be edited. Yes.
Try to find environments, lifestyles, career choices, things where your children don't have to mask to get by. And maybe culturally that's impossible in many circumstances, but wherever not, and maybe try and change the rules or the ground in places where it is, but at least work towards that goal and not towards the goal of teaching them to mask.
Would it be fair to say, building on that point, then, Karen, would it be fair to say that masking is a useful tool, but can be problematic when it's default?
Yes, I think it would be fair to say that sometimes it can be a useful and necessary tool, but not where it has to be the way of life.
Hmm.
Our goals would be for it to be used as a minimal and as a backup choice, but not to have to live your life by it.
Sure,
So,
sure.
as from someone who basically has lived most of my life, where I did feel I had to mask and wasn't always able to, and felt horrible when I couldn't,
Yeah.
and you know that's what I don't want to see for you know Becca.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Becca, from you, what would you want other families to know about recognizing neurodivergence in their families?
Yeah, I think that recognizing neurodivergence is really powerful, and can, contrary to what a lot of people have come to believe, I think recognizing neurodivergence can be a tool for connection. We've seen it in our family in terms of enthusiasms and talking about sensory challenges, and really, in order to have an authentic relationships, you have to acknowledge who you are, and what your how you experience the world, and if you miss the neurodivergent piece, then you're missing a big part of that authenticity in a relationship, I think.
Mm,
Very, very well said. Thank you. Great.
love it.
So, Becca and Karen, thank you so much. I think our listeners are going to come away with so much. Really appreciate it, and hope to see you in LA in your backyard sometime soon.
Yes, yes. I hope you guys have plans to come out soon.
Alrighty, take care.
All right, it was nice
Thanks.
seeing you, Barry, and nice to meet you, Dave.
Yes.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you.
We'll see you in LA.
Yep.
You got it.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.